Welcome to Unburied Remnants. The truth was never lost. It was buried. Let's dig in. In 1799, soldiers under Napoleon's command were digging fortifications near the town of Rosetta in northern Egypt. They struck something in the soil. A stone. A large, dark stone covered in 3 scripts: ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, Demotic script, and ancient Greek. It took 23 years to fully decode. But when it was decoded, the door to ancient Egyptian civilization opened in a way it never had before. What scholars found inside that civilization was extraordinary. A theology that had been developing for more than 3,000 years. A pantheon of gods more complex and internally consistent than almost anything else in the ancient world. And a structure, underneath all of it, that looks remarkably, uncomfortably, like the divine council we found in Sumer, like the B'nai Elohim of the Hebrew texts, like the Assembly of El from the Canaanite tradition. This episode is about whether Egypt's gods are a completely separate invention, or whether they are the same beings wearing different masks. In this episode, we are going to read what the Egyptians actually called their gods, and discover the word means something nobody told you. We are going to find out why the divine trial in Psalm 82 and the divine trial in the Ennead are structurally identical, 3,000 miles apart. And we are going to look at the Tepi, Egypt's version of Eden, and what it tells us about a memory every ancient civilization on Earth shares. The gods of Egypt have a name, and once you know what it means, the whole series clicks into place. The ancient Egyptians called their gods the Neteru. The word is usually translated as gods, but a more precise rendering is guardians or watchers. Let that word land. Watchers. The Neteru were organized into councils, not loosely associated mythological figures, but structured, hierarchical assemblies with specific roles, specific domains, and specific relationships to one another and to humanity. The 2 most important councils were the Ogdoad of Hermopolis and the Ennead of Heliopolis. The Ogdoad, 8 primordial beings, represented the forces that existed before creation. They came in 4 male-female pairs: Nun and Nonet, primordial water; Ha and Hauhet, infinity; Kuk and Kauket, darkness; Amun and Amunet, hiddenness or air. These 8 beings were not gods in the way we usually think of gods: anthropomorphic, personality-driven, involved in human affairs. They were cosmic principles, the substrate of reality before creation began. Now read Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. The earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Darkness, the deep, the primordial waters. Formlessness and emptiness. The same pre-creation elements that the Ogdoad personifies, darkness, water, infinity, hiddenness, are present in Genesis as the condition of the earth before God speaks. The Egyptians personified what Genesis describes, or Genesis describes what the Egyptians personified. Which came first is a question scholars still argue about, but the structural parallel is not in doubt. The Ennead of Heliopolis was Egypt's second great divine council, 9 gods who formed a family dynasty: Ra, the sun god and creator; Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture; Geb and Nut, earth and sky; and the 4 children: Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. The story of the Ennead is a divine drama of cosmic proportion. Osiris, the rightful king, is murdered by his brother Set. His body is dismembered and scattered. His wife Isis gathers the pieces, reassembles him, and through an act of divine power, resurrects him, at least partially, to conceive their son Horus. Horus grows up and claims the throne. The dispute between Horus and Set over who rightfully rules Egypt is brought before the divine council, presided over by Ra. It is a divine court case, a heavenly tribunal. Psalm 82. God stands in the divine assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. The divine council sits in judgment over a dispute about rightful rule and justice. the Contendings of Horus and Set. The Divine Council of Egypt sits in judgment over a dispute about rightful rule. Same structure, different names, different geography, 3,000 miles apart. Every ancient tradition has one. A divine being who gives forbidden or advanced knowledge to humanity. In the Hebrew and Enochic tradition, it is the Watchers, specifically Azazel and Semjaza, who teach metallurgy, cosmetics, astrology, and the cutting of roots. In the Sumerian tradition, it is Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water, who gives humanity the Me, the divine decrees that encode all of civilization's arts and knowledge. In Greece, it is Prometheus, who steals fire from the gods and gives it to humanity, and is eternally punished for it. In Egypt, it is Thoth. Thoth was the god of writing, mathematics, science, medicine, astronomy, magic, and the measurement of time. He was the scribe of the Divine Council, the being who kept the records. He was said to have given these arts to humanity, and in later tradition, he became associated with secret and forbidden knowledge, the hidden things that humans were not supposed to possess. The Hermetic tradition, which emerged from Alexandria in the early centuries AD, blending Egyptian, Greek, and Jewish ideas, attributed its foundational text to Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes. This was a fusion of Thoth and the Greek god Hermes, himself a divine messenger and guide between realms. The Hermetic texts open with a claim that has echoed through Western esotericism ever since. As above, so below. As within, so without. The universe mirrors itself. The divine council above mirrors the structure of human society below. The heavenly war mirrors earthly conflict. Heaven and earth are not separate. They are reflections of each other. That idea, the mirroring of heaven and earth, is also the structural logic of the Divine Council theology from Episode 3. The nations on earth were governed by divine beings assigned from above. What happened above shaped what happened below. As above, so below. It's not an occult slogan. It's a description of how the ancient world understood the relationship between the divine realm and the human one. The pyramid texts are the oldest religious writings in the world. They were discovered, inscribed on the interior walls of the Pyramid of Unas at Saqqara, dated to approximately 2400 BC. They predate the Book of the Dead by centuries. Their purpose was specific: to guide the soul of the deceased pharaoh through the afterlife and into the presence of the Divine Council. The texts describe a journey, a series of gates, challenges, and ultimately an ascent to join the gods in the celestial realm. What is remarkable about the pyramid texts is what they reveal about Egyptian cosmology at its most ancient. The pharaoh does not simply die and go to heaven. He undergoes a transformation. He joins the Divine Council as a member, as a god himself, or as a being capable of standing in the presence of the gods. This is not primitive superstition. This is a sophisticated theological system in which the boundary between the divine and human is permeable, in which the right human, under the right conditions, can cross it. Sound familiar? The sons of God in Genesis 6 crossing the boundary into the human realm. The Nephilim as the product of that crossing. The Divine Council members in Psalm 82 being stripped of their divine status and made mortal. The boundary between divine and human is the central drama of every tradition we have covered in this series. Egypt's tradition is not an outlier. It is another witness to the same fundamental understanding of how reality works. Egypt's most haunting theological concept is the Tepi, usually translated as the first time. It refers to a golden age, a primordial era before the current world, when the gods themselves walked on earth. When the divine and human realms were not separate but unified, when the world was as it was supposed to be. Every Egyptian religious act, every ritual, every temple ceremony, every royal coronation, was understood as a reenactment of the Tepi, not a commemoration of it, a literal reenactment, an attempt to make the present moment touch the first time again. Now place that alongside the Hebrew Eden, the divine garden where God walked with humanity in the cool of the day. the state before the fall, before the separation of divine and human became complete. And alongside the Sumerian Dilmun, the paradise land before the current age, where there was no sickness, no death, no separation from the divine. And alongside the Greek Golden Age, before Prometheus's gift turned the world into what it became. Every single tradition we have examined in this series remembers a time before, a state in which things were better, a golden age that ended, a paradise that was lost. The Tepi is Egypt's version of Eden, and the whole of Egyptian religious practice was an attempt, sustained across more than 3,000 years of recorded history, to get back there. That is not mythology. That is grief encoded in ritual. The memory of something real, preserved in the only language ancient people had to preserve it, the language of the gods. There are three possible explanations for this consistency. First, the human mind naturally produces these stories because they reflect something universal about our psychology, the experience of being mortal, of longing for transcendence, of living in an imperfect world. Second, these traditions share a common ancestor, a source civilization, now lost to us, whose theology spread outward and was adapted into each of these different cultural expressions. Third, they are all remembering the same real events. Different cultures, different languages, different centuries, same events. The gods of Egypt are called the Neteru, the Watchers. The Watchers of Enoch are the Bene Elohim, the sons of God. The sons of God in Genesis are the same beings who appear before the Lord's throne in Job. The divine council of Psalm 82 mirrors the Ennead of Egypt. Thoth and Enki and the Watchers are the same archetype. At some point, the pattern stops being coincidence. What it becomes instead, that is the question this series exists to ask. We have now covered 7 episodes: Sumer, the Watchers, the Divine Council, Yahweh, Göbekli Tepe, the Nephilim, and now Egypt. In every case, we have found the same things: a structured hierarchy of divine beings, a moment of boundary crossing between divine and human realms, forbidden knowledge given to humanity, a catastrophe, a memory of something better that existed before. Next episode: the flood. Not the biblical account, the geological record. We're going to look at what the Earth itself says happened approximately 12,900 years ago. And then we're going to look at what 200 flood traditions across the world say happened at the same time. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching Unburied Remnants. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe to help support the channel. Stay curious, keep digging.